You're listening to the Mile High Vineyard podcast. For more information about the Mile High Vineyard, go to milehighvineyard.org.
Good morning. My name is Jay. So glad you're here with us, especially if I've not met you. See a number of new faces. Thanks for coming to be with us this morning. And we are continuing in our series for Lent, Famous Last Words, where we're looking at the 7 different statements that are made by Jesus from the cross. But I want to do something a little different this morning. Could be weird. This could go well or not well at all. So we'll see. But as I was praying for our time this morning, even again in worship, I just had just a really clear sense that there's a number of us in the room that maybe come in where there's a pain or a pressure or a challenge in front of us that makes it almost impossible for us to be present. I don't know if you ever had grief in your heart or pain in your life, that it's like all you can kind of see or experience, right? You're trying to have conversations with people, you're trying to listen, you're trying to do whatever, but it's just the thing that's in front of you. You have maybe even a pain in your body. I don't know if you've ever had a toothache that disables you from like normal activities. Have you ever had that? But sometimes it can be internal too, like you're just grieving, for example. Or the fact that you don't have work, or you've had some kind of weird argument in your family, or with your spouse, or something, or with your kids, and you just can't focus on what's in front of you. It's like a fog. And I just felt as we started this morning, it would be good for us to pray for you specifically. To bless you, to pray for you, to ask for God to give you grace to be here with us now, because you are bringing that with you. And everybody you bump into is dealing with something, right? Every day, all day. But sometimes it's more pronounced. And you might be able to notice a time in the past, but I felt like maybe for some of us it's in the present. And I would like to pray for you right now, so that maybe you might actually get something out of the sermon, for example. Instead of just sort of being stuck. That was presumptuous, possibly arrogant. But I don't intend it that way. I just think it would be good for us to pray for you. So if you would be so brave, in the context of your brothers and sisters, family, people that care about you, would you just stand? If I'm speaking to you, would you just stand up so we can identify you and just pray for you right now? Stand up right where you're at. Great. If you're next to them, you're around them, would you just put like a hand on their shoulder? If you're not next to them, would you just extend a hand to someone nearby? It's just a physical way of showing you're praying. We're just going to pray a blessing for you right now, okay? I pray for each person here standing and those who maybe don't even have the energy to stand, God, this morning. And I pray that the pain, the challenges, the struggles, the difficulties that are present to them, that are clouding their vision, that feel overwhelming, I pray that by your Spirit you would come upon them even now, and you would give them peace, give them rest. Break through the places where they experience fear or shame or even pain in their bodies, in their minds, or even in their spirit, their emotions, Lord. And I pray that in this, somehow you would help it to become right-sized. You know, where it's inflated and it's beyond what's really happening, it would be shrunk down. And above all that, they would have eyes to see that which is good and right and true and beautiful around them, not just what is difficult and hard. And somehow in this time of being together this morning, they would experience your presence and your love. Break through, push through that, I pray. In Jesus' name, let it be. Amen. Amen. Thank you for being so brave, is to do that. And hopefully that offers you something of power and presence. I'll continue in our Lent series famous last words. Some of you are doing stuff for Lent, maybe. For those of you that haven't been raised in church, this is the 40 days before Easter. So this is 2,000 years of church history where we celebrate leading up to Good Friday, which is when Jesus was crucified, and up to Easter, where we celebrate that he rose again. So for 40 days, what people have done historically, traditionally, is they give something up and they take something on. So historically, they might give up some food, for example, or maybe a meal or certain kinds of food, or to modernize it, it's social media or Netflix, or maybe even like sweets or candy, something like that. And in that, you suffer ever so slightly as a means of pointing you towards the suffering of Jesus. Does that make sense? And then you also take something on, maybe a practice that connects you to God in a unique way. So maybe a practice of prayer or study or whatever. And you try something on that maybe you do every day or maybe a few times a day or once a week or whatever. So how many of you are practicing something of this variety right now in this season? Okay, it's not too late, people. And I know some of you right now are going, Jay, listen, here's what you don't get. I grew up doing Lent stuff in a church background I was in, and it was a miserable, awful experience. I try to avoid miserable things. It might even be worse than that. I might have been sort of legalistic, like you have to do this. My only, challenge to people who have lived with legalism in their life is apathy is also not very helpful. So doing things wrongly is not great. Doing nothing, also not great. So what you can do is you can do the dumb things you did before for dumb reasons, but actually make them worship. So try on old things that felt weird in new ways to actually connect with God. So that's worth trying. It's not too late. And I've challenged the church a couple times. I talked about this. Be in prayer for our church. If you're taking something on, pray for God's power and his presence and his love to be in our midst very tangibly. Because I believe that those are the kinds of prayers God answers. So, does that sound good? So in that, we've been looking at the 7 statements of Jesus from the cross. We're on our 3rd week. And this week, I think is really interesting, kind of stands apart from the other weeks, honestly. Because what the words from the cross that we'll look at today very briefly point us towards is how God intends to help us in every area of our life. In every single area. If I asked you this morning to list 3 to 5 things that you're just not good at, you're just bad at them. You're just bad. Do you have things come to mind right away? Some of you are like, 3 is a big number, Jay. Okay. If you can't come up with 3 to 5, if you're married, ask your spouse. The list will grow instantly. If you're not married, ask your friends and your coworkers. Ask your parents, and the list will grow exponentially. If not your parents, then your siblings, and they will enjoy it way too much, giving you this list. And for most of us, even if you come up with things, if you bring that up to your spouse, for example, or a sibling, I guarantee you it'll make for an interesting day today and a great week. What am I bad at? And even if you bring it up, you say, I've realized I'm not that great a driver. And they'll be like, oh, you are bad, actually. In other words, they might not just increase the number of things, but they'll increase the depth of those things. They'll be like, oh no, you way underestimate how bad you are at that. You say you could be a little cleaner. No, you are a slob. They'll just push it all the way to the bottom. Okay, so when you think about those things, 3 to 5 things, how many of those things are you actively seeking help in? How many of those things are you like in some form of a relationship where you're looking at the people around you saying, I need help here? Like, I really need help. What do you recommend? What can you help me with? How can you maybe even shore up my life? Like, sometimes there's things we're not good at that you actually just aren't going to be good at. Like you're just never going to be good at them. No matter how hard you try, right? Some things are fixed traits. They don't change. And the only way that you can sort of be compensated is if somebody actually just kind of like does it for you in a certain way. My hunch is, as I ask you that question, you realize that the majority, if not all of the things you thought about a moment ago, you really aren't getting any help in. Not in an active, direct way, not in a clear way. And I would find as a pastor, or even as I look in the mirror at my own life, there's something difficult about this. I don't know if it's entirely cultural. There's something in it where we don't want to look weak. We don't want to look helpless. We don't want to ask for help. We'd much rather be in control and do it badly, if necessary, to our own detriment and honestly to the detriment of everyone around us. For me, the place this was most poignantly noticed in my life is when we were newly married. And a little bit about Jay. I have like no mechanical ability, like none. Like if something has like 2 or 3 things happening at once, it's like magic to me. I just look at it like, how is this happening? You know, like every day is a miracle for me. I turn on my car, I'm like, what is this? Listen, I'm not stupid. Like I'm a pretty bright guy, but there's just something about the way all these things interact that I just can't put it together in my mind. Like I studied philosophy. I can say, what is an engine? But like an engine, like there's these things happening in there. It might as well be voodoo. I just have no idea what's going on. But as we were first married, you know, I made the mistake teaching at a class at my church, this church. I was teaching a class. In the middle of the class, as an illustration, I said, you know, like I don't have a car. It's really embarrassing. Even as a grown man, a married man, my dad has given me rides from time to time. And this guy came up and said, hey, Jay, I so appreciate your teaching, your story. This is great. I actually have a car I want to give you. I went, oh, this is incredible. He said, yeah, come by my house. Come get this car. Great. Go to his house, and he goes, here's the car. Well, here's the thing. The car had been smashed. Half the front of the thing was smashed. The engine technically worked, but the venting was all destroyed. So exhaust would blow into the car, right? And the coolant didn't work because all those things had been smashed up. So you had to blow it on hot air all the time. So you're just blowing exhaust into your face so that it won't just overheat. P.S., it would not shift out of second gear. So it would go first, second, it was automatic transition, and then that was it. It wouldn't go in reverse. Also, none of the brakes worked. They were all destroyed, dismantled, who knows how. So of all the things I just listed, you can make a car work with all those things. Like, you know, you can drive, you know, you can get places not going faster than 35 miles an hour. You can park in such a way that you pull through. Or you Flintstone your way out. You like push with your foot. Some of you are like Flintstones. Anyway, so you push with your foot. So you can do all that stuff. You blow the hot air, you wear a mask, all kinds of things, right? So you do all that stuff, which I did. The thing that's most important, though, is the brakes. The brakes are a big deal. Like, you can't just be like, it'll work out. You got to do that. So I took it to the place, said, hey, I need my brakes fixed. And they quoted me like $1,200. And I went, I don't have $1,200. This is nuts. And look at this. I mean, like, I'm not putting $1,200 into this. So I went to the auto parts store, again, being myself. I can't pretend to be someone else. And I'm like, hey, here's the car. They're like, yeah, you know, they just bring these boxes out. Here's the things. Great. So I go back to my house, got my car jacked up, and I'm opening the boxes. I take the tire off, and I'm comparing these things to those things. So I'm like, okay, so this looks like that. So I got to get that off and this on. Let's go. You know, like, so there I am, like, friggin' just hitting things, and I get them off. And then I'm getting them on. And I'd get them on, and it would just sort of it would just fall when it just wasn't fitting correctly. And I'm like 2.5 hours in to doing this, and some random dude in my neighborhood is just walking by, and he goes, "Hey, put new brakes on your car, huh?" I'm like, "That's right. That's exactly what I'm doing." Because these parts were like $60. I'm like, I'm the best. Like, I'm so good at this. And he goes, "Wow, you're removing the bolts with pliers. Do you have a ratchet set?" And it was as though he was speaking Chinese. I went, "I'm not sure what a ratchet is. I don't even know the words you're using." He goes, "Hey man, let me just come back." So he goes to his garage, he comes back. I'm not kidding you. 10 minutes later, it's done. Whole thing's done. And he's like, "Wow, that, you got to get some more things." If you want to do this, there's a lot of things. I can't remember, I don't even know the things now, okay? I don't know. And so and I'm telling you, it was a mix of experiences, okay? I felt really small. I felt really stupid. I felt little, right? It just felt humiliating. And yet, having brakes, it's like really good. It's like a really good thing. It's so helpful for driving. So I was like, this is great. This is so good, and yet I feel really small and stupid. And I don't know how you feel when you need help. And it's the kind of thing you feel like you should probably be able to do, but you can't. And honestly, in relationship to all the problems of the world, you think, am I really going to ask for help for this? Really? My hunch is if you don't know how to do that with people, you definitely don't know how to do it with God. Because we look at God as though he's really busy and there's a lot of really important things going on in the world. Can I really bring him this? Can I really ask for that? I've had the opportunity many times to sit with congressmen or senators or even presidents of nations. And I always ask, what can I pray for you? What could we pray for you? I ask this all the time in my day-to-day life. And when I ask people, what can I pray for? You would be shocked at the amount of times people answer like this: pray for the starving children of Africa. Right? Because that's a big deal. But then when I say, actually, I'm asking, how can I pray for you? See, it sounds really austere. It sounds really powerful. It sounds really meaningful. But the truth is, it lacks a certain form of humility. And it demonstrates a misunderstanding of who God is and what he's like and what God cares about. The text we look at today is Jesus hanging on the cross challenges our understanding of how God really cares for us, how he cares for everybody. We read it just a moment ago. Let me read it to you again. This is Jesus hanging on the cross, okay? John chapter 19. He says this: near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, the disciple took him into his home. This is a scene no mother ever wants to see. It's beyond comprehension. A man who has done nothing wrong ever in his entire life is stripped naked, beaten an inch from his life. He's bleeding out of his head, out of his back. He has nails driven in his hands and in his feet. Even the ways we understand the cross are so sanitized. You know, in the images we have of the cross, Jesus has like a little loincloth on. That's probably not accurate. He was probably completely naked. He's completely naked. And make no mistake about this. For the Romans, the cross is not an execution device. It happens to kill you. But that's not what it is. It's a humiliation device. It's a device that humiliates you and humiliates anyone who knows you, and it's designed to create fear in everyone who sees you. Because what the cross says is, mess with Rome, and this is going to happen to you. And in the Roman Empire, if you were convicted of a crime and you were to be crucified, you would be crucified often in the place where you committed the crime so that people would see you. And it was a long, drawn-out process. So, for example, if you stole a number of times to where you were convicted, to where you would be hung on a cross, they would crucify you where you were stealing. So that anyone that went to that market or went to that shop would see you hanging there naked, bleeding out of your hands and your feet, beat up and bruised. And here's what's bizarre. You could literally have a conversation with that person. They're gasping because the main way that you died on the cross was your lungs began to fill with fluid. And you would choke on your own fluid as you were bleeding out. And so they would push themselves up, coughing and gagging to try to get a breath, and sink back down on their hands and push themselves up. This could last for days. So people who are going to the same shop, it would be over your head what crimes you committed. And you could mock them, you could yell at them, but here's what you left thinking: I'm not going to do whatever that guy did. That was the whole intention. Enemies of the state for Rome, they would literally crucify people for miles walking into the city. So as you walk into Rome, you hear gasping and coughing and moaning. And just like what you see in Jesus, the people closest to them, friends, family, would often gather around as a means of demonstrating support to this person suffering unto their death. They would maybe even bring sponges with water on it to give them something to drink, raise it up to them so they could drink something. And it was a way of trying to demonstrate solidarity, to connect. I'm here. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Your family's here. We're here for you. A friend standing there. Can you imagine being a mother? Looking up at your son, gasping and coughing and wheezing and bleeding. Can you even imagine what that would be like? And you're standing there with a few family members, a few friends, and it's a sign of support. We're here. You're not alone. I can't help but imagine that Mary thought back in her mind to the day she dedicated Jesus in the temple. And when she dedicated him in the temple, a prophet walks up to her and prophesies about her son. This is what he says in Luke chapter 2. Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and the rise of many in Israel, and for a sign to be opposed. And listen to this, and a sword will pierce even your own soul, to the end that thoughts from many hearts will be revealed. She thinks back to that day in the temple and thinks, this is probably that. It isn't just physical, of course. We've talked about that in the weeks up to this. We'll talk about it in the weeks up to Easter. It's spiritual. God is taking the sins of the world into himself, into his body. But man, if it was just physical, it would be enough. But it's more than that, it's spiritual. And in the midst of this horrific scene with his mother standing there and him gasping out a few statements, it's mind-blowing to me. He looks down and sees his mother. And he looks at John and says, behold your mother. And he looks at his mother and says, behold your son. And the text says from that moment on, Mary lived in John's home. He says, hey, Mom, I want to make sure you're taken care of. As a widow, I want to make sure you're okay. Hey, John, I'm not going to be able to take care of my mom. Can you take care of her for me? kind of a God is this? What kind of a man is this? Who in the midst of unimaginable suffering cares about his mom enough to look at his friend and say, could you take care of my mom? I'm going to make sure you're okay. Is that how you see God? As in the midst of whatever else is happening, he cuts through the crowd and he looks at you and says, I care about you. I care about you. I care about what you care about. I want to make sure you're okay in the midst of all of this. That the smallest things matter to me. The scriptures from front to back tell us that God cares about all of it. It all matters. All the anxieties you have, all the pressures you have, they all matter. Peter says it this way. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6, he says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at a proper time he may exalt you. It's kind of austere, powerful, right? But the very next verse, he says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Not just the big ones, but all of them. Cast all your anxieties on him. Why? Because he cares for you. I don't know what you see when you look at God, but if you see like Zeus in the sky with a lightning bolt, who's managing the big things and punishing the wicked, turn your eyes to the cross of Jesus Christ and see a man who's bleeding on your behalf, who's taking the sin of the world upon himself and still pauses to care for his mom. See that is God. That is love displayed. That is beautiful beyond measure, and it's unfathomable to me. Just a few weeks ago, I was sick. I had the flu. I'm not sure how you are when you're sick. I become a small baby. I become a different thing. I don't resemble myself. And I found myself laying in bed like, this is not okay. The world has gone wrong, and I'm so desperate. And I find myself crying out to God. I'm praying, and then sure enough, my youngest daughter gets sick. And I'm praying over, oh God, help my daughter, just help her not to be sick, gosh. And right after I'm praying for her, I go over and, I'm looking at my Facebook feed, and there's this video about Syrian believers who are being killed for their faith and imprisoned. Two things happened immediately. First, I went, oh my goodness, what is happening in the world? And then next I went, and I'm praying for my daughter to feel better? What a loser I am. What am I doing? I just want to say that is the exact wrong thought. See, I'm imagining that God's like me, like he can only do one or two things at a time. But that's not what we see in God. What we see in God is a father who can tend to my daughter, and he's caring for my brothers and sisters in Syria at the exact same time with full attentiveness. He's able to do that. And he does care about my daughter, and he does care about me being a little baby, not just all the big stuff, because he's a good father. He's unlike anyone that we've ever known or could imagine even. I wonder how it works for you. Is it some little sickness like it was for me? It could be, maybe you just feel lonely. And you say, can I bring this to God? That I'm lonely? What a dumb thing. Compared to the atrocities happening in the world and the pain people are living with, can I bring my loneliness as a single person? Can I bring my loneliness in the midst of my marriage? Can I talk about the fact that I don't have the friends I wish I had, and God help me to be a better friend and have better friends? Can I bring that to God? Maybe it's even about your body. You look in the mirror and you go, I just don't like how I look. I feel ugly. I feel stupid. I'm getting older, I look at the body, I'm like, oh my, what is this old guy looking back at me? I feel so useless. Can I bring that to God? Can I say, God, I don't like how I feel. I don't like who I'm becoming. Help me. Know that I'm loved by you, that I'm secure in you. Can I bring that to God? Yeah, I mean, the scriptures are super clear. Of course you can. There was another person who I'm sure was thinking, I don't need to worry about me right now, and that's Mary staring up at her son, saying, this isn't about me. But in the midst of even that moment, he looks down at her and says, I care about you. You're my mom. I want to make sure you're okay. Can you see a God who suffers and dies on your behalf but still cares for even the littlest pieces of your life? The scriptures are clear. God comes to make all things new again. That's the big things and the little things. It's everything. And too often we feel guilty about burdening God with the small things, and I want to challenge you. Let him into every part of who you are. No burden you carry should you not put in front of God. That is a sign of ultimate humility, that you really do need help. And you need the grace and the love that only he can give. It means even that he might want to give you joy in the midst of what you've agreed it just should be suffering and misery. Have you ever had a moment where somebody tries to give you something great in the midst of all that seems messed up, and you almost feel guilty that something great is happening? That you could be grateful in the midst of what's difficult? That's the kind of God we serve. The scriptures tell us stories like that over and over, that God gives people things graciously in the midst of what is awful suffering. And even in that, it's a choice of humility to say, I choose to receive what's good even when I'd prefer to beat myself up. That takes a certain kind of courage, doesn't it? That takes a certain kind of humility. For me, I have a story I come to back in my mind often, which is I was having a really bad month. This is a number of years ago. I think about this often. I was having a really bad month, and from time to time, pastors have really bad months. I was having a really bad month. When you have thousands of people where all the pain of their lives are crashing toward you're with everyone in their worst moment, it can wear on you. And it had worn on me. I'd had a really bad month, and I was just, all I could see was bleakness and discouragement. And I'd had somebody recommend a book to me. It was actually the autobiography of Lou Holtz, who's a coach. You know who Lou Holtz is? He's a coach at Notre Dame. Anyway, it's this autobiography, and I read this autobiography, and he describes how he had made a list of 110 things that he would love to have happen in his life that he thought were completely impossible. To make a list of these things. Because then, if they happen to come along, you take a hold of them, but if you don't make the list of them, you think, well, I'm too busy and things are too awful for me to take that on. You won't see them as gifts. You'll see them as distractions. But believe that there's gifts that come toward you. And, he had stuff like be on Johnny Carson. Win the national championship as a college football coach. Stuff that but at that point, he was a high school assistant coach. He thought this will never happen. But it's kind of a cool thought. Like, how fun to and at the time he wrote the book, he had 118 things, and he had, remember, these were impossible things. He'd seen 87 of them happen. So I read that and I thought, and he said, make sure you make this list when you're completely just blown up and miserable. Because it'll at least help you think about things. I thought, well, this is a good time for this. And so I'm making my list. And one of the things I wrote, and again, this is so frivolous. He said, write things that are frivolous, write things that are career-oriented, relationship-oriented, stuff like that. So one of my frivolous ones is I love to play golf, and so I wrote, I'd love to play golf on a course that hosts the major in the year they host a major. Because they usually close the courses down. They don't let slaps like me play at those times. And I thought, that's never going to happen. And so I wrote that. That'd be so fun, because then I'd watch the pros play it, and I could remember how I played the hole, and or whatever. It'd be really fun. That'd be fun for me. It's silly, but it's impossible, but that'd be fun. I'm not kidding. 3 days later, I get a call from a friend of mine. He says, Jay, we had some people drop out of this tournament. I was praying and I thought, I need to ask Jay. Torrey Pines is hosting the U.S. Open in 3 weeks. And we're going to host a tournament there. I'd like to host you to play golf at Torrey Pines. And I went, what? He goes, yeah. And then I thought, I can't do that. I have all these miserable people I'm supposed to help. I'm serious. It was my immediate thought. I can't do that. What will they say if they're like, oh, you went to go play golf? You know, I'll be like, I don't know. I'm sorry. And everything happened just the way he said it would. And then I was the prophet, Lou Holtz. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. And it was completely free. I got on a plane. I felt bad for about 9 of those holes. If I'm honest, I felt bad, like I shouldn't be here. What am I doing here? This is so dumb. I'm supposed to be doing important things. But then I birdied the green that goes towards the ocean. So it's like, never mind. I feel great about this. Stuck it in there, snaked in an 8-footer. Anyway, that was for the 3 golf people in the room. And I'm not kidding. I think about that moment because I think it was like God just said, I care about you. Here's something I can give you today. And I believe that's how God works. I believe that's who he is. I saw that in El Salvador. We were there this last week. I saw this woman look at us and say, you know, because of what you guys give, they gave us $300. I started a business. It's changed my whole life. And I run 3 businesses now. I bought my own home for $300. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. And I just stood there thinking, $300 just moves through my hand effortlessly. And it changed this woman's whole life and her kids' lives. And I was so struck by the moment. And I just felt like I had the same thing happen to me where I just thought, I'm so dumb. And I pray for like the fact my tooth hurts. And almost immediately I felt the Lord come and say, it all matters to me. I care about all of it. Stop beating yourself up. Bring it all to me. See the joy in her face. Be grateful that you got to be. Bring it all to me, Jay. I want to do all of it. I wonder for you, how do you beat yourself up? How do you keep God out of certain parts of your life that you see as mundane or that don't matter to him? What if God wants the whole of you? And he really wants to help. Will you humble yourself under the mighty hand of God? And will you cast all your cares on him because he cares for you?
Thank you for listening to the Mile High Vineyard podcast. We would like to encourage you to respond to what you just heard by filling out a Connect card and sharing a prayer request with us. As a staff, we pray over those each week and would love a chance to connect and pray for you. To do that, please go to milehighvineyard.org/connect. You can also respond by being generous, as God has been generous to you. You can do that by giving online at milehighvineyard.org/give. We hope to hear from you soon. Thanks again for listening.